A report has revealed the price of education is expected to blow out for families right across the country. We've seen that public education is expected to cost homes as much as $87,000, adding to further cost of living pressures for families. Let's bring in live now the education editor at the Australian newspaper, Natasha Bita. Appreciate your time. Thank you. For a public education that's meant to be free in this country, it sounds like it's getting awfully expensive to get a child through their school years.
Yes, there are all these out-of-pocket costs like uniforms, laptops, UBS devices, hats that get lost every few weeks, ties, special socks with the school logo on it. It's getting very expensive for families. The ABS data that came out this morning shows that education costs rose 4.6% last year. Of course, not many people would be getting a pay rise of that measure. The issue, I think, is that low-income families will struggle the most because $87,000, that's over 13 years, but even so, it's thousands of dollars every year, for school excursions. And, children should not miss out on things because of their parents' poverty or their choices. All children should have an equal opportunity for a really good education. So this is an issue for governments as well as for families.
Because the expenses that you mentioned there, I mean, they're not really optional, are they? Kids need uniforms. Every parent wants their child to be able to go on school camp with their peers. Technology is a huge part of learning now, and that comes with extra costs too.
Yes, and I think that public schools need to make it a little easier. I think sometimes they try to compete with private schools and have their fancy hats that cost $25 when you could go and get an equivalent hat without a logo for, $5 at one of the chain stores. So I think that they really should take this into account. Uniforms that have got special logos on them cost, 4 times as much as something you could get that's quite generic, because I think that children's learning has nothing to do with what they're dressed like. It's to do with what's happening in the classroom.
You mentioned private schools. Roughly how much are parents paying in terms of private school fees over their child's schooling? How much are they forking out?
Well, of course, private schools, their fees can vary wildly from $5,000 a year to up to $40,000 a year. But Futurity Investment has done some calculations, and they said it averages at $300,000 over 13 years for a family. Often families choose public schooling for primary school, and then they'll put their children into a private school for high school. But if you've got 3 children, that's nearly $1 million. In Sydney, it's the most expensive city. We're up at an average of $350,000. So you could buy, probably not a home in Sydney, but a home somewhere else for that sort of money.
$350,000, goodness me, that really is eyebrow-raising, that one. In terms of when you're looking at the cities and comparing them back to public education here, is education actually more expensive in certain states around the country?
Yes, surprisingly, the survey came out and showed that Melbourne public schooling is more expensive. Now, I'm not sure why that is. They might have more sort of textbook costs, etc. But I do think there is an argument in public schools to make textbooks free for low-income children so that they're not missing out. A lot of schools do provide free laptops on loan, but perhaps we need to get back to basics and realise it's not all the bells and whistles of the technology that will make a difference for children.
And Natasha, just finally, as someone who's in the thick of the education field, reporting on it day in, day out, it's a controversial question, but what do you think? Are the costs of private schooling worth it for those who can afford it?
Well, obviously the families think that it is worth it, or they wouldn't be spending that much money. Sometimes they think it's about the values of the school. Sometimes they think that their children get a better education. Other times it's the old school tie. Their parents went there, or they want a particular network or a peer group. I believe that public schools also provide an excellent education for children. So parents perhaps need to sort of look at priorities. Is it better to give the children a private school education, or could you use that as a deposit to get them into the housing market? It's an issue that might be on more parents' minds as inflation keeps increasing.
Natasha, really appreciate your insights and analysis as always. Thank you so much.